What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Dope Life Podcast, the dopest podcast ever. And I'm, of course, your host, Coach AJ, Dope Life Coach, the dopest life coach ever. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. And if you could be oh so kind and dope and leave a rating and review so that my podcast, I'm a one-woman show. So if you could do that, it helps get my podcast into further of the people who are just like yourselves, just trying to come in week in and week out and get really dope tips to living and loving their dope ass life, to, self-care and self-confidence and all of that good stuff in between. They'll be greatly appreciated. So as always, we're just going to take 3 deep breaths, if you don't mind, just to kind of center ourselves before the episode. Again, if you are driving, please, I beg you, don't do this with your eyes closed, but you could do it with your eyes open. So if you don't, I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable and just breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and sigh it out. 2 more times. In through your nose, out through your mouth, and sigh it out. One last time. In through our nose, out through our mouth, sigh it out. Yeah. Now we're a little bit more centered to get in today's episode. And in today's episode, I'm just going to be giving off some real quick tips and being able to identify burnout. And this episode is definitely dedicated to everyone who is working, everyone who has a 9 to 5, and entrepreneurs in between. I'm going to be giving out some tips that have worked with me personally, and also ways how to identify when the burnout feeling kind of comes in. So me personally, when I was able to sense that something was off, was one night I drove myself home, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's gone through this. You drive yourself home, you get into your driveway, and you're trying to figure out how the hell you just drove yourself home. How did I get here was my question. I knew I did it. I remember getting in my car, but the time in between, I couldn't remember. And it was a kind of a scary moment to realize that I was having those moments. So I had to do a little bit like, self-reflection, reevaluate, like where I was internally and how did I get here to the point where I couldn't identify just driving home. So what is burnout? Burnout is basically like exhaustion, right? But not just like physical exhaustion, mental and emotional exhaustion. And the more studies I looked into it, it actually happens more easier than we think. In fact, like statistics shows that a lot of the employees and entrepreneurs, it's like a mix up of 75, 76%. So a quarter of employees that have experienced burnout to some degree. So what are the symptoms? Exhaustion, as I said, lack of interest in activities is another one. Like certain activities you used to want to enjoy, you no longer even want to participate in them. The thought of it's just like, I don't want to do it. You may feel tired a lot of the times or all the time, even when you have a really good night rest. You may also feel unmotivated compared to before. Certain things that you'd be like, yeah, I'm good. Let's go. All of a sudden, you're not even thinking, wanting nothing of it. A sudden decrease in your work performance and your overall performance. Certain tasks that would take you, in a reasonable amount of time now, it's dragging on. It's become a little bit difficult for you to even start or complete it. You find yourself stuck in like a tunnel vision while neglecting yourself. That was a huge one for me. Even now as an entrepreneur, sometimes I forget, okay, chick, you really got to take a step back from your laptop. You really got to take a step back from what you're doing and just be. You notice your body may feel tightened up. Muscles feel tightened. You feel so tense. I don't know if you have ever had a massage before, but my masseuse, shout out to her, there's times where she'd be like, you're super tense. And I'm like, damn, she figured me. Like it, and headaches is another one. Upset stomach is another one as well. Please keep in mind, I am not a doctor. This is also based off of research and what I've experienced as well. So please, I'm not a doctor. this could be different from everyone, right? All of our bodies react differently. You've noticed like an inner critic, like a cynicism towards yourself or towards others all of a sudden. Um, Almost like kind of like comparing a bit too, right? And that inner critic in yourself, you're kind of judging yourself a bit more, or you're judging others a little bit more. Now, now that we have like a little bit of a list, the question you're probably wondering is like, okay, like, coach, this is a little bit familiar. How do I work through these? First of all, recognize them, and also understand that the earlier you recognize them and you're more aware of them, the I find the better off you are. The moment I recognized and realized I was in burnout for 6 to 12 months without noticing. Um, and it wasn't until I got assaulted at my job where I had to sit down with my thoughts, which really made me say, "Whoa, what was been going on?" and reevaluate everything. Um, so the earlier that you catch some of these, symptoms, or like a repetition of these, the more better off you are working through them. So one of the ways that I've learned to work through them is, like I just said, I paused. That moment of just pausing, giving yourself a moment to just be. Obviously, as adults, we don't really recognize that pausing is okay. There's a guilt surrounding that a little bit, but I had to learn, like, fuck the guilt. My body, my mind, my soul, my emotions all need me to pause. The second would be like just reevaluate the priority list that I have. You know, we're supposed to be at the top of our priority list. And if you are a person like a caregiver, a parent, I know you're saying, "Well, oh no, my that person or my kids come first." And I wholeheartedly understand where you're coming from, because life is life, and sometimes that's just how it is. But at the same time, I always often say, and if you've been rocking with me for a while, I always say, if you don't fill your own cup, how are you supposed to be filling theirs? So keep that in account as well. Setting boundaries. So when we often talk about setting boundaries, we talk about setting boundaries with other people, other things, our jobs, of course, right? So definitely set boundaries with your work. If you're an entrepreneur, I know this is hard as being a fellow entrepreneur. If something pops in our head, we want to like get to it right at. It'll be like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Oh, this is a great idea. So create a system. I would say, if you're an entrepreneur, one of the systems that I've learned is, if an idea pops into my head in the middle of the night, I grab my phone, I record it as an audio, and I roll over and go back to bed. Like, you could deal with it in the morning. But also set boundaries with yourself. Set boundaries with yourself. If you notice that sometimes you're not prioritizing yourself, set that boundary, like, we are going to prioritize yourself because the importance of X, Y, and Z for ourselves. If I don't do this, the consequences X, Y, and Z. And we know sometimes what the consequences is because it takes over our body, our mind, our soul, our spirit, or, emotional, physical, all of it, right? We're aware. The next one was seeking help, working with a therapist. I work with a coach as well. And by me seeking help and speaking up and talking up, it has helped me tremendously, tremendously. Because now you're actually working through those emotions and those feelings of far more than maybe you would have done it before, which also kind of goes back to number one, you're pausing to seek that help. And the absolute last one is to give yourself some grace, honestly. I know I say this often, but give yourself a mountain of grace, like a big, huge mountain of grace. And the reason why I put that one last is because we think we don't give ourselves grace as adults. So sometimes we're super hard on yourself than the actual society. Because we're just trying to constantly keep on that hamster wheel and keep going. But sometimes it's okay to get off the hamster wheel. In fact, I would get off that hamster wheel. And just remember, like, burnout is a lot more common than we think. And it's important to take these steps before it just like blows up in your face. because it will, and it can. And again, I'm going to emphasize, seek that support, take care of yourself, practice self-care, pause. All of those are very important. And some of them, besides the seeking help, obviously you have to pay for that. Some of them don't cost you anything by you just taking a moment and stepping back. But I do find that there is by seeking support is a great investment in yourself. Working with a coach, a therapist, a counselor, those are very great investments in you. And the investment that you get, the return you get, is more valuable than you can ever imagine. So just a quick little recap. We went over what is identifying the symptoms of burnout. We talked about exhaustion, sudden increase of lack of performance, kind of feel like you're stuck in like a tunnel vision, noticing your body may be like tight and tense, and it affects your headaches and stomach and stuff like that. It affects your sleep. You may think that you've had a really good night's sleep, but you're still tired. You're exhausted when you wake up. And noticing that inner critic, that cynicism towards yourself and towards others. Now, to work through it, I gave you 6 tips you can use. First is just pause, take a moment to pause. Second is reevaluate your priority list, putting yourself at the top of that list. The third is set boundaries with yourself and your work. The fourth is seeking help with others and seeking as much help as you can, even if it just means talking to a really good friend that will be very open and understanding. And the last one was give yourself grace, as much grace as you can, because you're just doing the best that you can. And I'm going to leave a link in this description below. You can go ahead and download a free guide with all this information. If you were unable to make notes, you just click the link, you subscribe. If you already subscribed, don't worry, you'll get it in your email within this week, which is awesome, of course. So you don't have to worry about that. And if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and share it on your Instagram story. You could tag me in it at @dopelifecoach_. That'd be greatly appreciated. And thank you for joining us again, as always. Stay dope, walk with peace and love.